You ever wake up one day and realize someone you love is quietly planning to erase you? I'm not talking about petty drama. I mean truly making you disappear, scrubbing your name from papers, twisting your story, and making sure you vanish from your own family's history. For me, it started with one text from an unknown number. "They're recording you. Watch your back." Suddenly, my cozy home became a stage, and I was the unwilling actress in someone else's sick performance. But they didn't count on one thing. I've played the long game before, and I never lose. My name's Evelyn Hart. I'm 58 years old, a widow for 6 years. People like to think they know me, the quiet type, they say. A former librarian, the kind of woman who knows how to keep her voice low and her head down. They imagine I spend my days baking pies, tending the garden, maybe reading a dusty novel by the fire. And for the most part, they're right. I did live a quiet life. In my old Victorian house, the one with the wraparound porch and creaky wooden stairs, alongside my son Michael, his wife Claire, and my 7-year-old granddaughter, Sophie. It wasn't perfect. Michael worked long hours, Claire ran a small design business from home, and I often found myself looking after Sophie more than they did. But I didn't mind. She was my light, bright-eyed, endlessly curious, the kind of child who still thought her grandma could fix anything. We had our rhythms, our small arguments, our shared dinners where laughter always found a seat at the table. Life had its ups and downs, but we managed. At least, that's what I believed. Then came that text. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, when I was sorting through a box of old photographs in the attic. The phone buzzed in my apron pocket. An unknown number. One short message. "They're recording you. Watch your back." At first, I laughed. I mean, who would be recording me? What would they even capture? Me alphabetizing the spice rack? Me knitting in my armchair? The idea was absurd. But then, little things began to surface. A photo frame on the hallway wall shifted ever so slightly. A lamp in the study, angled differently than I'd left it. A faint scraping sound from the vent above my bed when the house was otherwise silent. Most people wouldn't notice those things. But librarians are trained to spot the smallest discrepancies. You spend decades cataloging books. You learn when something's out of place. And these things, they weren't random. They were deliberate. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe Sophie had been playing near the lamp. Maybe Michael or Claire had dusted the frame. But deep down, my instincts were whispering a different story. Something was wrong. The house I had called home for decades suddenly felt altered, as if I was walking through a set someone else had arranged. And the more I looked, the more I realized someone wasn't just moving my things. They were moving me toward something. And I wasn't sure yet whether it was a trap or a test. My hands trembled as I clicked through the files. Each clip was carefully trimmed to twist reality. Conversations cut mid-sentence, moments of silence stitched together to make it look like I was staring into nothing for minutes on end. It was a narrative, a fabricated one, where I was no longer Evelyn Hart, the woman who had raised Michael single-handedly after his father passed. No, in their version, I was a fragile, forgetful old woman, one step away from being a danger to herself and others. I leaned back in Michael's leather chair, my chest tight. My son. My own flesh and blood. He had sat in this very room, not just watching but editing the slow erasure of my sanity. And Claire, the sweet, smiling daughter-in-law who used to bake me lemon cake on Sundays. She must have been in on it too. The teddy bear haunted me most. That was Sophie's bear, her bedtime confidant, the one she hugged when she had nightmares. And they had gutted it, turned it into a spy. That wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. Suddenly, memories rushed back in a new light. The day Claire accidentally spilled tea on my favorite photo album. The time Michael insisted on paying the bills to make things easier for me. The hushed phone calls that stopped whenever I walked into the room. I had thought they were just being helpful. Now I saw the truth. Every act of kindness was a calculated move on their chessboard. And then the final confirmation, an open document on Michael's desk, half-written but damning enough. It was a petition for guardianship. My guardianship. They were planning to present me as incompetent before a judge, with all this doctored footage as evidence. The moment that paper was signed, they could take my house, my savings, everything I had built. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the glowing screen. Anger burned under my ribs, but so did something sharper: clarity. If they thought I was weak, they were about to find out just how dangerous a quiet woman could be. I closed the study door behind me, heart pounding but step steady. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also given me a gift: the truth. And the truth was ammunition. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. No, that's what they'd expect. Instead, I would watch. I would wait. And I would gather my own evidence. Because if they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. I didn't sleep much those first few nights. Not because I was scared, though the thought of my own son plotting against me was a kind of heartbreak I'd never felt, but because my mind was busy building the framework for their downfall. Jonah and I met twice a week, usually in the back corner of a coffee shop nobody under 40 ever stepped into. He'd bring his laptop, I'd bring a notebook full of ideas and timelines. We mapped out every move like a chess game. Step 1, collect evidence, enough to make sure this wouldn't just blow up in my face if they denied it. Step 2, control the narrative before they could. Step 3, make them walk straight into their own trap. The fake meltdowns were the hardest part. I'd drop a plate in the kitchen, let my hands shake for a moment too long. I'd forget Sophie's lunchbox on the counter and then wander back hours later pretending I had no idea where I left it. Claire, ever the opportunist, would be whispering to Michael while sneakily glancing at their hidden camera, no doubt thinking she'd struck gold. Meanwhile, I was catching it all from my cameras. Mine were better hidden, and my angles? Perfect. Every forgetful moment was followed by a cut to me in my bedroom, clearly explaining into my own lens exactly what I was doing, timestamp and all. By week 3, Jonah had a full archive, their manipulated footage on one side, my unedited truth on the other. It wasn't just a counterattack, it was a dismantling of their credibility. The next layer of the plan came from Claire's cousin, the unlikely whistleblower. Over coffee, she slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies of emails between Claire and a lawyer, discussing how they'd declare me mentally incompetent, move me into assisted living, and transfer the house to their names. The kicker? They were planning to sell it within 6 months. My home. The place I'd raised Michael in. Gone. I remember staring at those pages, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Jonah put his hand over mine and said, "Evelyn, when this is over, you won't just win, you'll bury them in their own lies." So I refined the plan. I scheduled a family meeting for the following month, pretending I was finally ready to talk about my health and the future of the house. They'd think they were about to win. They'd walk in expecting a vulnerable old woman about to hand them the keys to the kingdom. What they didn't know was that the kingdom had already been wired for sound, and the walls were closing in. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My 59th birthday. Claire insisted on planning a surprise dinner, inviting extended family, neighbors, even Sophie's teacher. I knew it wasn't kindness, it was a stage for their performance. But it was also the perfect trap. The living room smelled of vanilla frosting and expensive wine. Guests gathered around the big oak table, chatting over polite laughter. I wore the same gentle smile I'd perfected for years, the kind that said I'm harmless. Inside, my heart was a metronome ticking down to impact. After the cake was brought in, Claire cleared her throat. "Before we cut this, Michael and I, well, we have something important to share about Mom's health." Her voice trembled with fake concern. Michael placed a sympathetic hand on my shoulder, his eyes scanning the crowd like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. The lights dimmed. The television screen on the wall flickered to life. And then, perfection. Instead of their doctored videos, the footage Jonah and I had prepared began to play. First, a split screen. On the left, their edited version, me shouting, forgetting names, knocking over objects. On the right, the raw truth, calm conversations, steady hands, deliberate movements. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A neighbor's hand shot to her mouth. Even Sophie's teacher whispered, "Oh my God!" Claire's smile froze, twitching like a glitching puppet. Michael's face drained of color. Then came twist number one, Jonah's voice over the footage. For those just joining us online, this is a live broadcast. These side-by-side clips show how Evelyn Hart's own family fabricated evidence to declare her unfit for guardianship, aiming to seize her home and assets. I glanced at the TV. The live chat counter ticked upward, 300 viewers, then 500, then over 1,000. Comments poured in, furious strangers typing things like disgusting. And how could they do this to their own mother? Twist number two hit seconds later. From the back of the room, a tall man stepped forward, the very lawyer Michael and Claire had been consulting. I'd invited him myself. Everything they planned, he said, his voice steady, would have been a violation of state law. And now there's recorded proof of intent. His eyes swept the crowd. If Evelyn chooses, criminal charges can be pursued. Claire stammered something about misunderstandings and concerns for my safety, but the room had already shifted. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives were pulling away from them physically, as though betrayal were contagious. And then, my personal favorite, twist number three. I reached under the table and pressed play on a small audio device. Out came a recording from weeks ago, Michael and Claire laughing about how easy it'll be to make her look crazy. Their own voices sealed the coffin. By the time the footage ended, no one was singing "Happy Birthday." The officers moved with the calm precision of people who'd done this before, but for me, every second felt like a slow-motion reckoning. Claire's shrill protests bounced off the walls, each word making her look guiltier. "I was protecting her," she yelled, twisting against the officer's grip. "You don't understand. She's unstable." The officer didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Michael didn't struggle. He just stared at the floor, hands cuffed in front of him, his shoulders rounded in defeat. That image hurt more than I expected. My son, the boy I'd raised to value honesty, now standing as a criminal in my own living room. I wanted to ask him why. I wanted to hear him say there was some misunderstanding, some mistake. But the hard drive on Jonah's laptop was merciless. Facts didn't bend for hope. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the guests. Some backed away from the chaos, others simply stared, eyes wide, as though they'd stumbled into a crime drama instead of a birthday party. A few had their phones out, already capturing more footage to share online. I didn't stop them. Let the truth spread. Sophie slipped through the crowd like a small beam of light in a storm. She wrapped her arms around my waist, pressing her face into my side. Her whisper was so soft I almost missed it. "I knew you weren't crazy, Grandma." My throat tightened. I bent down and held her close, smelling the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I know, sweet pea," I murmured, "and I'll always fight to be here for you." Jonah stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. "Everything you've seen tonight, the fake edits, the hidden cameras, the meetings with a lawyer, has been verified. We've submitted copies of the evidence to the police, the court, and the media. Elder abuse is a crime. So is defamation. And this," he gestured toward the screen still frozen on Claire's smirking face mid-lie, "is exactly why we don't look the other way." The lawyer I'd invited stood beside him. "For the record," he said, "had they succeeded, Mrs. Hart could have been forcibly removed from her home under false pretenses, stripped of her rights, and separated from her granddaughter. This is as malicious as it is illegal. The weight of the truth settled over the room like a heavy quilt, warm for those on my side, suffocating for those who weren't. I looked around, meeting every pair of eyes, making sure they understood. Evelyn Hart might be quiet, but she wasn't defenseless. As the police escorted Michael and Claire out into the flashing blue lights, I felt the knot in my chest loosen for the first time in months. I had survived. And more importantly, I had won. The court hearings moved faster than I expected. When the evidence is airtight, the law doesn't drag its feet. Within weeks, the judge granted me full guardianship of Sophie. The restraining orders were ironclad. Michael and Claire were barred from contacting us in any way. Their lawyers tried to bargain, but each attempt only seemed to tighten the noose they'd woven for themselves. Once the legal dust settled, I walked through the old house one last time. Every room seemed to hum with the memory of raised voices and whispered schemes. The place that once held birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and sleepy Sunday breakfasts had become a stage for betrayal. I sold it without hesitation. We moved to a small coastal town 3 hours away, where the air tasted like salt and freedom. Our new home was modest but bright, with big windows that let in the morning sun. Sophie picked the smallest bedroom, declaring it her lighthouse, and painted it pale yellow. I took the room with the best view of the ocean. Every night, I'd sit by the window, listening to the waves and feeling the steady rhythm of a life I was finally steering again. Some nights, the betrayal still crept into my thoughts. The image of Michael in handcuffs, the sound of Claire's voice dripping with venom, they were scars, not wounds, but they still ached from time to time. I let myself feel it, then I let it go. Because the truth is, that pain was proof that I had survived, and that survival was my quiet form of revenge. But most often, my mind drifts back to that night in my living room. I can still see the exact frame where Claire's smirk froze on the screen, her lies falling apart like cheap thread. It wasn't the shouting or the arrests that stayed with me, it was that precise moment when she realized her control over me was gone forever. That was justice. Justice isn't always loud. It's not always served in a blaze of glory. Sometimes it's methodical, calculated, a chess game where patience and evidence are your queens and rooks. In my case, it came in the form of careful planning, loyal allies, and the courage to expose the truth in front of everyone who mattered. Sophie and I made our own traditions in the new town. We walk the boardwalk on Friday nights, eat ice cream even when it's chilly, and collect seashells to line the windowsill. Jonah visits often, always with that same easy smile, and sometimes we sit together on the porch, watching the horizon. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. And me. I've never been more alive. Because taking back your life isn't just about defeating the people who tried to break you, it's about building something better in the space they once occupied. And that's exactly what I've done. Sometimes, the people closest to you can become your greatest threat. But silence is not surrender. It can be the sharpest weapon you own. If you've ever faced betrayal, remember, you have more power than you think. And when justice finally comes, it's worth every second of patience. Tell me, do you think Evelyn's revenge was justice, or was it going too far? Comment below.